Dr. Hahn, thank you so much for joining me here on Called and Caffeinated. Welcome.
It's great to be with you, Stacy. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much. And you have a beautiful new book, Exquisite, out from Sophia Institute Press. And I just loved reading the first 50 pages are essays that you wrote about probably my least favorite time of year growing up, but it's becoming one of my new favorite times of year, which is Lent. And the first chapter was titled The Joy of Fasting, which was like, I actually legitimately LOL'd in real life. I laughed out loud. How can fasting possibly be joyful? And if we're not joyful, are we doing it wrong?
Well, let me take a giant step back and contextualize this by providing a little background. First of all, no, I don't enjoy fasting, but I enjoy what fasting produces in terms of the fruit that comes to me, to my family, to others as well. But the idea of connecting joy and fasting, that seems so odd, paradoxical, or just downright counterintuitive, it has a twofold source. On the one hand, if you look at the rule of St. Benedict, the only time the term joy occurs is rather unexpectedly when he's describing Lent. He speaks of the joy of Lent. Well, why? Because it's not a joyful time, unless, of course, it is. 40 days of Lent prepares for 50 days of Easter. And there's a sense in which we have to really gain or at least grow in self-mastery in order to experience the idea of self-donation, self-giving. And that's really what Christ did in his 40 days of fasting and in the preparation for his own passion, death, and resurrection. And so he calls us not just to imitate him, but also to participate in him. And so you hear in the book of Hebrews, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and then enter into his glory. And this is a kind of a preparation. And so my son just directed a musical at Catholic Central, Bye Bye Birdie. He was the assistant director, but had a whole lot of hands-on experience. And the practice, the rehearsals, all of those things, lead to a difficult and challenging time of preparation. But it would flop apart from that. And so to enter into the joy of Easter really does require this sort of discipline. I mean, I think it was decades ago that we learned about Nautilus, no pain, no gain. Well, in our tradition, there's no cross, there's no crown. And it's not just that he does it for us, he also does it in us and through us. The other thing I wanted to mention too, the other source was doing a little bit of background research after my friend Charlie McKinney invited me to provide the essays that would accompany David Geisler's recipes so that people could fast and deny themselves, but still enjoy really fine dishes. I said to him, can I bring in the background story of Irma Rombauer, who is not well known, but the book that she wrote way back in 1931 it's called The Joy of Cooking. And the story that is the backstory for that is that Irma was a jet-setting, high society, St. Louis upper crust kind of gal who would host or be invited to a number of banquets along with her husband. But when the Great Depression hit, it hit home because her husband took his own life in 1930 and left her really impoverished as a widow in 31. Her adult children weren't able to help her. And so she took all of these mimeographed sheets of recipes that she had seen her friends use, that she had used herself, and compiled what became known as the joy of cooking. And this was a new experience. This was a breakthrough of sorts, because what the book ended up doing was taking the great recipes that only the elite in the high society of St. Louis had, down to ordinary families who even in the 30s, in the midst of depression, learned that they could enjoy perhaps fewer meals, smaller meals, but they could really enjoy great recipes. And so it democratized this sort of elitist eating. And over the course of decades, it sold something over 18 million, 9 editions. It was the inspiration of Julia Child. But I think of an analogy here that we usually associate austerity, rigor, discipline, penance, fasting with monasteries, or with convents or with hermits. And, in the East with the practice that goes back to antiquity in terms of the monastic discipline. Well, on the other side, in most of the West, Catholics live in great comfort. But at the same time, we've been experiencing something of a Catholic renewal, especially in Catholic family subcultures, where you live in Winchester, where I live in Steubenville, so many homeschool families. We could wait until, once again, the authorities from on high flip the switch and impose the rigor, that we hear about from the 40s and the 50s, where you went to these Catholic schools and you had to fast and all of that.
Yeah.
Since 1966, almost all of that has been relaxed for the majority of Catholic lay people, since Pope Paul VI issued Penitential, which sort of relaxed the rigor of Lent and Advent. Yet at the same time, when you read it, it wasn't intended to do that. It was intended to kind of internalize the values of penance that will lead to holiness and joy. But nobody took it that way. This was in the post-conciliar period, where if you have a loophole, you widen it so that trucks can drive through. And, in the spirit of Vatican II, the ideal was, well, look, in the third world, there are people, many people, who don't eat meat on Monday through Thursday, so fasting for meat on Friday is not all that meaningful. And so we'll consign it to the regents and the bishops and all of that. But in the process, we backed into laxity, we backed into a loss of discipline, and we just kind of coasted through the late 60s and into the 70s until practically all of Western Catholicism was largely secularized through comfort and luxury and this sort of thing. And so now, for 101 reasons, I would say more and more of us as Catholics, whether we're converts or cradle Catholics, are experiencing this rediscovery of the traditions, the living traditions, the lost traditions that are not really lost. But in the process, I have friends, I suspect you do too, who call themselves rad trads. And in my experience, they often end up being more like mad trads. They're angry. And I understand why, but the tradition, once you discover it, is meant to lead you to a sort of a joy, a gratitude, a sense that, wow, this is so much more than the sum of its human parts, that the saints and the angels surround us. And so even if you're raising like 2 or 3 high school kids, as we were doing several years ago, you can, as a Catholic family, enter into Lent to prepare for Easter in a way that, okay, there will be bumps along the way, for sure. There'll be resistance, especially from the teenagers. But overall, what we found over the course of 20, 25, 30 years, we homeschooled for 26 years, that we really had an experience of momentum, moral momentum. I mean, there were ups and downs, there were bruises, there were stops along the way. But now, from our first, we have 6 kids. From our first 3, we now have 21 grandkids. The 4th child is now Father Jeremiah for the Steubenville Diocese. But all of them can point back to the pains and the challenges of giving up dessert, giving up soda pop, giving up TV, giving up all kind of cream in your coffee, giving up the internet, Facebook, and all of that. And they've internalized it. They now own it for themselves. My oldest son, Michael, has 7 kids. He's a professor of scripture at Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Emmitsburg. And I would say, he put up the biggest fight of all as a teenager. And now he has put himself out. His own lifestyle, his family's lifestyle is slightly more disciplined and penitential than our Hahn household ever was. And thus far have gone along with it, And one last story. Fasting is always a pain in the butt. And then about 20 some years ago, I won't go into any of the details, but we hit a crisis and it was really hard and there just didn't seem to be any way out. And so my spiritual director at the time suggested that I intensify my prayer. I try some fasting. And so I did. And I went several days and then some weeks without without breakfast or lunch, but not without coffee.
Yes.
And so my holy hours, my rosaries were in a certain sense weaker because I was just kind of exhausted. And yet they were also more intense, because when you feel the weight of your own weakness, you also recognize the need for God's strength, for his grace,
Yes.
for God to make up for all that I lack. And when you pretend you don't lack anything, that you're in control, you're only fooling yourself. You're not fooling your guardian angel or anybody else that matters. And so we had a breakthrough in my own family as a result of that period. And we've had 2 or 3 other crises that I won't go into, but we've had depression in my family line that goes back at least 3 or 4 generations, and actually we have a milder case of it than I suppose my grandfather did, who took his own life. But I've been attentive. I've been really keenly aware of the fact that it's a spiritual battle. On Kimberly's side of the family, nothing really like it. But on my side of the family, it came in spades. And so fasting in Advent, preparing for Christmas, fasting in Lent, preparing for Easter, but fasting throughout the year, as Christians have done for 2 millennia, especially Wednesdays and Fridays, and it might be small things like, no butter or no sugar in your coffee, or no salt at the dinner, or no extras, or no seconds, or taking the smaller portion. These minor mortifications that don't really add up to much, certainly can't really become any reason for bragging or spiritual pride. They're just too small to be that significant.
Yeah.
And yet I find these little crosses over time have led to larger graces, and that the whole family has been the beneficiary, and I suspect others too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was so beautifully explained. Thank you for all those great stories. As you were talking, I was thinking about the Diary of St. Faustina, which I am slowly working my way through. I just read a little bit every day right before I pray, because she's just amazing. And I was just thinking about her going through so much suffering. Like Jesus would give her suffering for souls, basically to save souls. And so she would take it on just as, Jesus did. And it's so beautiful to see that on this other side of that, Jesus will always say, you're going to suffer, but don't be afraid. And I think when we're, like you were saying, when we're so removed from suffering, it doesn't give God any room to really show us his power, and to show us that on the other side of that suffering is peace. And if we lean into it in the way, if we lean on him through it, then what's really waiting for us is not more suffering or a black hole of despair. But if we do it right, it really is peace. And like you said, that kind of just the joy of self-mastery as well. Can we call it that?
Exactly.
And cheers. I hope you're enjoying something cozy wherever you are. Before you go, please be sure to like this video and leave a comment letting me know what Dr. Hahn said that was most helpful for you. And if you like this content and you want more of it, do be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a notification. Before we get back to the episode, I also want to just thank this episode's sponsor, which is the Christian Family Movement. Now, before COVID, I heard from people all the time how hard it was to find community. And now, 2 years later, it is insane how much COVID has stolen from us, especially one of our basic human needs, which is connection. I just want to pass along CFM to you as a resource. They have 70 years of experience, that's like 3 generations, of helping build community among Christian families to support one another. The pillars of CFM are simple: conversation, reflection, and action. And they provide you with a lot of great materials to foster those more intentional conversations, as well as just having fun and relaxing together, which I know for my family is like our favorite thing to do with other families. So in this crazy and turbulent world that we're living in, our communities are literally our greatest asset. You can check them out at cfm.org. Now let's get back to our episode with Dr. Hahn.
Quoted a book by Dag Tesore. Did I say that correctly? Okay.
Yep, you did.
Yep. Dag Tesore's book called Fasting, and a little gem of a book. And you quoted, God commanded sacrifices to see if man believed in him, or if he were capable of doing something that makes sense only if God exists. So would you say that based on that quote, it's accurate to say that fasting in a sense kind of proves our faith to God?
Yeah, it proves our faith, but it also strengthens our hope, because hope is what we need to obtain something that is difficult. And so it's arduous. And so what is it that's driving our faith and our hope? Ultimately, it's love. But what is it that perfects love? What is it that proves the genuineness of love? Well, it's not words only, I love you. It's not just the warm, fuzzy feelings that come along with those words or not. you really can see that on the one hand, love without sacrifice can be warm, fuzzy feelings and nothing more. On the other hand, pain without love can just kind of lead to darkness and despair. In becoming Catholic, 36 years ago, I discovered this mystery of suffering, the mystery of redemptive suffering, which really is the science of the saints. I mean, that's really what saints are. They're the ones who graduated from the school of suffering. And if there are many souls in hell, I think they would all testify to the fact that it doesn't pay to drop out of that particular school, because the mortality rate is 100%. We're all going to end up having to suffer and die. And as you just mentioned a minute ago, Stacy, lean into it. I remember when I was a college kid, one summer, I went rock rappelling near Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and my friend was a great rappeller. But he said the hardest thing, in this case, it's not to lean into it, it's to lean out. Because, you've got the rope, but if you're leaning out, you're just going to feel like you're going to fall. And then he said, just let go and lean out. And when I did, you grab hold, and then all of a sudden you find this freedom that comes from letting go. The 12-step program involves that line, let go and let God. And I find that this is the case, that, Jesus, it's not how much he suffered that saves us. It's how much he loved that saves us. But the suffering is what the love is what transforms the suffering into sacrifice, and so the pain is what transforms the passion of Christ into, from the loss of life to the gift of life. Yeah. And as Protestants, we always thought that was done by Jesus as our substitute. But as Catholics, you realize, no, he does it as our representative. He wants to represent his sacrifice, not only in the Mass, he wants to represent his life, his love, and also his suffering and death in us. As Paul states so eloquently in the second half of Romans 8, we'll be heirs with Christ provided we suffer with him in order that we be glorified with him. And so leaning into this through fasting, I also found this statement too, that fasting is what magnifies the power of prayer by coupling sacrifice with this physical act of faith. Everybody knows that, we need to be spiritual. But what the Catholic Church is out to teach us is that there's a physical side of being spiritual that has not been dissolved since the incarnation. It's been taken to the heights by the incarnation. I mean, prior to the coming of Christ, Judaism practiced fasting. In fact, you can even find the Greek philosopher and founder of medicine, Hippocrates, speaking of fasting as being the great interior medicine. And Aristotle talking about how it's indispensable to virtue, self-mastery through self-denial. And so you find it also in Ramadan for Muslims. You find it in Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, when the king hears the preaching of Jonah, the least likely royalty to repent. He fasts and prays and brings down the mercy of God to spare the city and all of that. There are so many lessons for us to learn, not only as Catholics within the church, but also Americans in an increasingly secularized society. But the idea that there is a physical side to being spiritual, that there's also a rhythm of fasting, just like there's a rhythm in life in terms of the four seasons. Springtime has come and we're getting ready for Easter. But the rhythm of the church is set up by the liturgical calendar. And the more we internalize it, the more we resist the idea of treating it as though it's alien, it's external, it's imposed upon us. I remember reading what Rabbi Raphael Samson Hirsch said back in the 19th century. He's considered by Orthodox Jews to be the founder of modern Orthodox Judaism. And he was asked, why don't you Jews have a catechism? He said, our calendar is our catechism. And of course, we have a catechism, and I'm glad we do, but there's a sense in which one hand washes the other, that when we live the creed, when we study the catechism, but we do so against the background of the rhythm of the liturgical year, Christ enters us, we enter into his life, whether it's his birth at Christmas, or whether it's the 40 days of fasting and temptation in the wilderness, or whether it is the joy of the resurrection that follows. I just think that there is a divine genius hidden like leaven that we are, called upon to live. And if somebody said, well, explain it to me, make me understand, and then I'll do it, it wouldn't work. It's really another example of where obedience leads to understanding. And if we obey from the heart, we're going to realize that this is not something that humans invented. This really is something that comes from on high, from someone who knows us better than we know ourselves. He loves us more than we love ourselves. And he legislates what he knows will fulfill us even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Absolutely. And I just think that this is the path not only to holiness, but there's a sense in which it's sanctified common sense. I mean, it's true in the work world. It's true in sports, no pain, no gain in every area of life. Why wouldn't it apply in becoming saints?
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting me fired up for Holy Week. Because usually this is the point in Lent where I'm like, oh, I'm tired of this. So this will be I think this is a sprint. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was interviewing Father Gregory Pine the other day, and you were talking about hope, and Father Gregory is so funny and he's a genius. He's like, yeah, when I was a kid, I used to tell my dad, like, Dad, Jesus is going to come soon. I can't clean my room. I would be lacking hope in the eschatological reality if I cleaned my room because Jesus is going to come. He's like, we shouldn't do it. No, he's hilarious.
There is, and wise.
Yeah, so wise. Yes. Oh my goodness. He wrote a beautiful book about prudence. And I think his interview might be out by the time I release yours. So I will be sure to link to that in the show notes. Yeah, he's fantastic. But yeah, thank you for that explanation. I love the energy behind everything that you say, and there's a sense of, like you were saying, the liturgical calendar being so much bigger than we are, and we can insert ourselves into it and learn from it. And there's this idea of sort of collectively, building up the kingdom of God, as you were quoting St. Paul earlier. So I know that like fasting, I've always thought of as an individual practice, but it really can be a collective practice. How do you apply that? How do you think of it as a collective thing?
Well, on the one hand, it should be personal and individual. On the other hand, especially in family life, it's one of those things where if you've given up desserts, but they haven't, there's an incongruity, and so you have to be careful. As St. Jose Maria said, don't let your mortifications mortify others, So if you're going to do certain minor mortifications that nobody is going to be hurt by, that's fine. But if you're going to be giving up other things that people have not given up, you're going to have a powwow. And so we generally have had that for many, many years. Since becoming a Catholic 36 years ago, back in 86, Kimberly became a Catholic in 1990. Up until 90, I was doing it all alone. I mean, I would take our kids to Mass. They were learning the ropes, as it were, but they were still in the single digits. They were young. When Kimberly came into the church, she really came on board. And I remember the decision to become a Catholic happened when she drove out from Joliet to Steubenville on Ash Wednesday, asking our Lord, what should I give up for Lent this year? For the first time. And she was thinking about chocolate and soda pop or desserts or, seconds. And then as she made these decisions, she realized that she could almost sense God the Father talking to her heart. And she said, I heard him say, I want you to give up. I want you to give yourself to me in a whole new way, that this Lent really can be a complete change of life for you, for your marriage, for your family. I was out on the West Coast when I called her and she told me that, there were two sets of eyes that were not dry.
Wow.
And I mean, I was so moved by this sense that she said, it wasn't you pressuring me to become a Catholic. It was God, the Father, calling me home, but also inviting me to really allow this to permeate our home as well. And so over the years, we've had close friends who've given up smoking or alcohol. At times, I think the best thing might be to give up Twitter, or Instagram or Facebook, or the things that become subtle addictions that give us whatever the dopamine rush really is, But I think also positively, it ought to be more time for reading scripture, more time before the Blessed Sacrament, but also more time before a Blessed Sacrament that I call Kimberly. So we've been having these Lenten date nights. I don't recommend the TV series Castle, but we binge on Castle like once a night. And it's just the way we end the day because we're so similar to Beckett and Rick Castle, and what we want to do is to build up not only the church as the family of God, but also the domestic church. And we still have students living with us. And what we find is that these little minor mortifications, again, the rhythm of fasting and feasting, the physical side of being spiritual together, takes it from the realm of theory that the family is the ecclesia domestica. And it makes it so obvious. You wonder, why didn't everybody always know that, And we're not the Holy Family, far, far from it, But I would also say that this gives us the opportunity to go to Mass more frequently, but also confession. It's a penitential season. And so the requirement is to go to confession before, the Easter obligation, all of that. But, because I'm in Opus Dei, it's really a custom for us to go weekly. And I've always taught my kids that I do. They don't know what I confess, but they never complain that I go too frequently. And I've never complained that they go too frequently. But I just think entering into this awareness that God hates sin precisely because he loves us so much. And he sees the self-destructive effects of sin. And he also sees how subtle things are that lead us to sin long before we've given consent to sin. We've just become lax. We've let up in certain areas. And so this gives us the opportunity to not only set Lenten resolutions in place by Ash Wednesday over the first, second, or third week, but I would say, echoing something that you were just implying a minute ago, Stacy, that about halfway through Lent, we need laetare, we need joy, we need to kind of renew our own resolutions and renew our own awareness that, God, this is lasting longer, this is harder because I am weaker than I realized. And so help me to kind of double back, help me to renew the energy that I'm pouring out because, it's easy to get grouchy by the time you get to that halfway Lent.
Absolutely. So when you reach that point, do you give yourself a day off, or do you do something intentional prayer wise extra to really double down on it? Or is it more just like an awareness? How does that actually look for you?
I mean, personally, what I do is I usually give up on one thing I might have the one thing, so I might have an evening snack where I've been trying to go without, and then once I realize I've had it, and it didn't transform me, then I realized, okay, I'm grateful that I can go back and go without,
Yes.
And likewise, no cream in my coffee or, no dessert, or the tiny little things. But the one thing I really want to encourage, and that is, for many years, I was always intent upon doing a holy hour. And then life just got too busy. And I realized early on, it could just be intrusive, or it could really upset family life at night, especially if that's when I was going off.
Yeah.
So again, with my spiritual director's insight and encouragement, time with Kimberly helping get the kids down or whatever, just hearing about her day. She's a sacrament too, like the Eucharist, not the same, but still important for me. But I would say, renewing my resolution to spend time before our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, that is to me the highlight of Lent. And so last week I had to go without. And when I did, I apologized, but it wasn't something like a sin, but I missed him and I felt that. And so when I've gone back, it's like, I want to sustain this all throughout Lent, but I also want to get back to this being a daily discipline as much as it fits into my family life.
Yes. I totally resonated with you. I laughed so hard when you said that you had a snack at night and it didn't transform you, because these things, they become so built up in our minds. We just had the solemnity of, or the Feast of St. Joseph. And then we have the solemnity of the Annunciation coming up. And I was like, okay, taking a day off of Lent. And then Sunday, came around and I was like, well, having the thing, the it wasn't as great as I thought it was. Just the thing itself, the feast day was great, but just like this thing I'd been longing for, it's like we build it up in our minds, and it's really good to just realize like, oh, actually, I'm still empty even when I have that, unless I actually have God.
It's a reality check. We tend
Yeah.
to absolutize the relative goods,
Yes.
and then inadvertently we relativize the absolute goods of supernatural life. And again, it isn't as though he's just asking us to become hermits. A little bit goes a long way, and a little bit of love makes that burden seem a lot lighter.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to kind of add to what you were saying, which was also good, Sister Miriam James Heidland, I got to interview her recently about her book, Restore. And she said something that just has really stuck with me. She said, fast so that you can feast on something else, which sounds a bit like what you're saying with Kimberly, where you two are feasting together, but that's holy too, because she is a sacrament for you as well. So you're not just, taking away, but you're actually taking away in order that you might have something more, which I love. And my husband and I have just kind of introduced, we're trying to get a little bit of structure. We have 3 very little ones, 5, 4, just turned 5, just turned 4, and 1. Woo. So we're trying to get a little bit of structure in our day. And we decided, before the kids go to bed for 1 hour, we're just going to have a family hour where we play. They're just getting old enough to play board games. We're going to sing and play music together. We're going to feast on each other's company, and we're really going to do it very intentionally, which is so life-giving. And when you kind of just set that intention, it's so good. So we don't do home projects. We try to get the dishes done beforehand, and we just kind of have that hour together. And it's so fun, and it's so fulfilling. You start to learn, okay, I've taken away, social media. I've just kind of voluntarily been doing a lot of breaks from that. And it's like, wow, I actually really love just spending time with my family. It's so great.
That's wonderful. It reminds me too that Lent was often the occasion for us trying new things. One Lent we started reading Narnia, and when Lent was done, we kept on going through the Chronicles, and then we circled back. And I was down visiting my oldest son's family, and he's working through the trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yes.
And I was just enthralled, And sometimes we would do we started off when the kids were really young, doing an after dinner decade, and then that grew into the family rosary. But so often Advent and Lent were the times that we would gather and be more intentional about family prayer. And we would use Magnificat and maybe do morning prayer and or evening prayer. And I would just say that those things are just really what makes Lent special. And if we think of it strictly in terms of the things that we're saying no to, it just comes out on the darker side. But if we recognize that, no, these are going to afford us opportunities to spend more time together, to spend more time before the Blessed Sacrament, and just to enter into the joy of Lent, it becomes more than religious rhetoric. It really is a lived reality.
Yes, absolutely. I think you start to realize how truly not fun television is sometimes when you have too much of it, really. And I know my siblings and I, there was one time when I was home from college, and I'm the oldest of a number of siblings, and I read them The Hobbit aloud, and I tried to do a different voice for each of the 13 dwarves. And they still talk about that like it was the greatest thing that they have ever, because then of course I would start doing the Gollum voice or Gandalf voice, and it's supposed to be Bilbo or whatever. And I didn't realize it till halfway through the sentence, and they would just laugh. It was just was those silly things that just stay in your mind they really you look back on them, and those are the happiest moments that you don't necessarily think as you're moving through them. But the moments when you watch, TV, like you said, it's a quality time thing with you and Kimberly. But if you just do too much of it, it's so unsatisfying. Your life just slips away.
Yeah. Yes, Stacey, especially TV and the internet. Our culture, the political situation, we have a situation where our kids are taking away so many bad memories. Yes. What we've got to do is counteract that by making as many good memories as possible. Yes. And I would say the seasons of the year, just like the seasons of life, are all about making memories and making them so that we can share them later on, but not just reminiscing in some kind of nostalgia, but so that we're encouraged to continue on making more and more vacations, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, all of these sorts of things. We ought to punctuate family life by celebrating those things.
Absolutely. Hence the liturgical calendar. It's all coming full circle because there's so many feast days built right in. Every day is somebody's feast day. And maybe you shouldn't indulge in dessert every single day, but there's a lot you can do. So many different rich traditions that come through the liturgical calendar. So I know that I need to let you go very soon, but there's one question I wanted to dip into really quick. And that's for people like myself and many other people in my audience who may have suffered from self-image issues in the past. And, dieting / fasting is kind of just a very mixed up, process in their heads. Like, I know I used to kind of secretly look forward to Lent as my diet, and then even afterwards, the thought of depriving myself tapped into all of those times when I would, deprive myself to an extreme, that it really was hard to figure it out, this relationship between true spiritual fasting and kind of a more worldly, dieting. And actually somebody just reached out to me the other day and had that exact question. So I want to make sure I got to it. So with whatever time we have left, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
This is a great question. It's a hard one. There's no easy answer. And I would say one size will not fit all. Mm-hmm. And over the course of raising our 6 kids, it's 1 year at a time, 1 kid at a time. And we had issues not unrelated to what you have just mentioned. And so what I would say is prayer and fasting for each of the kids, and a great sensitivity when it comes to spending time with those who happen to be struggling. I won't go into the details, but I tell you, the most cherished memories are the ones that I spent hours and hours living in a cave, is how we put it, talking through the darkness of the depression and all of the things that went with it. And I could tear up right now thinking about the bond of love, the friendship, and the memories that we share because of that. But conversely, I would also say that if people do have that weakness and this taps into it, then I would say avoid that sort of thing and balance it out with friendship, spending time with family members, spending time doing the things that you enjoy, fasting a little bit, but fasting from the things that probably attach more, like Instagram or like Facebook or other matters that are, but those kinds of eating disorders, those other things that people struggle with, they have got to be recognized. Yes. And a certain healthy and holy realism needs to counterbalance a tendency that would be, obviously imbalanced. And I'll leave it at that and allow our viewers to take away whatever practical conclusions they might have. But this thing has not gone away. And I'm aware of the fact that many people, when it comes to food, really do need to learn how to feast and fast, but in a way that, you're back into integrity and balance. And so, yes. Yeah, I would also say this, that spiritual direction and counseling will fit in well also.
Yes. I was going to add that too. Please, if your body is sick, you go to a doctor. If you have, a problem in your mental health, please go to a counselor as well. I would also just add on to everything you said, which was great, that like we established, fasting on one thing so that you can feast on something else. I would say feast on the word of God and find out what he thinks about you through scripture, which really was, it took years for me to truly unspin all of these messed up messages in my head, but learning to read scripture and take it very personally was so healing. Song of Songs is wonderful. The Psalms are incredible. And just to learn that God loves humanity, and God doesn't just love you in a general sense, but your body that he created is so good, and it's not something to be punished, but something to be honored and respected and taken care of and cared for. So yeah, that would just be my little 2 cents. But Dr. Hahn, thank you so much for beautiful interview. I'm so excited to put this out in the world. What a treasure.
You're welcome. But 10,000 thanks to you, not only for the opportunity to have the conversation, but for that great conclusion, focusing on the Word of God. Talk about the bread of life, the living water. The Cappadocians spoke of it as being the wine of God's Word that leaves us in a state of sober intoxication, more sober than sobriety itself, but more
That's
inebriated
awesome.
intoxication. Yeah.
That's great. I love that.
Whatever, a little bit more every day to balance the little bit less that you have agreed to through Lent.
Yes, absolutely. So good. Thank you so much. And, you are I know so many people admire your work, and I hope you hear this often, but you are a really extraordinary light to many, many people. So thank you for being here today.
You're most welcome, and keep up the great work, Stacy. May God bless you, John, and the whole family.
Thank you so much.